The circle was finished, and the air was thick with the odor of sulfur and the weight of force that was not permitted. A demon, a being of pure evil, had been summoned by them, and its shape was writhing with shadows and flame. They had succeeded in doing so. Its eyes were like molten pits of wrath, and its voice was a growl with a guttural quality, using a voice that was shaking with a strange mixture of fury and triumph. They pointed to you and instructed it to destroy you. On the other hand, something altered when the demon switched its eyes forward. The temperature in the room dropped. The candles were extinguished one by one, and the snarl of the devil became less pronounced. When they shouted your name, which was its terrible form, retreated as if it had been struck by an invisible force, and its eyes enlarged in response. The demon experienced terror for the very first time in its existence. It was a very basic, fundamental fear, intoxicated by their newly acquired power. They stood there and gazed at their creation. Their fingers were shaking as they pointed toward you, and their voices were strained but arrogant. You are their target, a sacrifice to their hatred, and a victim who is doomed to suffer in excruciating pain. The eyes of the monster gleamed brightly like pools of molten malice as it flexed its huge claws, relishing the impending massacre that was about to take place. A crackling sound could be heard in the air, but it was not theirs. They were able to conjure up a nightmare and nightmares, a ravenous for suffering. Your adversaries beamed a sense of triumph, already blazing in their eyes because they knew they had won. When the monster took a step forward, flames licked at the air with a voracious appetite, and the floor shook with the weight of its presence. Your heartbeat remained steady and calm despite the pandemonium that was going on around you. Despite the fact that you should have been gripped by terror, a snarl, both guttural and ominous, emanated from the demon who was prepared to carry out its violent goal. Nonetheless, the moment seemed to drag on unnaturally during the time that your adversaries were. The demon halted a glimmer of uncertainty. Crossing its hideous face, they glimpsed anxiously at one another, their faces of smugness obscured by a sense of bewilderment as they faltered and became aware of the unexpected shift. A peculiar reality came to light during that period of hesitation. You are not only the prey, nor are you merely a victim who has been selected for sacrifice. This was the first time in its cruel existence that the demon had paused in a state of uncertainty. It was surrounded by shadows that flickered nervously. This beast, who is feared in mythology and is a monster whose presence almost certainly results in death, suddenly stood, uncertain and frightened of something that was not visible. Something about you chilled even the gloom. Your adversary's self-assurance was shaken and an arrogance with trembling. They were able to detect a subtle shift in strength, but they were unable to fathom the reason for it. They returned to a heavy and tight quiet, and their grins began to melt away, being replaced by nervous stares. The demon, who was now uncertain, waited, sensing that there was a threat close by that was larger than itself, a threat that was personified in a name that had not yet been spoken. When the summons finally broke, the hush your name poured out of their mouths in a caustic and authoritative manner. They gripped it as if it were a weapon, convinced that they would win. But something changed instantly. The demon retreated abruptly, as if it had been struck. Its flames flickered. Shadows shrank back in eyes. Its eyes, which had been burning with fury, momentarily abruptly enlarged in dread and became instantly little. The atmosphere in the room became eerily silent. Even your adversaries paused, their smug grins, frozen in confused uncertainty. At the same time that its claws were shaking, the demon took a faltering step backward. The huge creature appeared at you with a look of terror carved firmly into its features. The thing that, just a few seconds earlier, had been the embodiment of terror itself emanated. Fear. A fear that was raw and primordial. Your name lingered in the air, reverberating quietly and with an astoundingly potent force. It was repeated by your adversaries who were attempting to recover control of the situation. But each repetition made the demon's anxiety even more intense. It shook his head and growled in a feeble manner. Flames flickered and died, plunging the room into a deeper gloom. The circle of power shattered beneath the demons. foot, and old runes failed to function properly, despite the fact that your adversaries yelled out frantic demands and poured them out into the vacuum. The demon paid no attention to them and instead focused solely on you. It was able to see beyond your human appearance and recognize something ancient and legendary. It was a fact that was slowly dawning on all of them. You are the nightmare. Even demons are afraid of sweat beads. Your adversary furrowed their brows, their haughtiness transforming into panic. They had conjured up a weapon. On the contrary, they encouraged panic. The demon, a monster of evil and destruction, cowered before your silent strength, and their greatest strength melted into helplessness. As a result, the understanding slammed them like a ton of bricks. Your name is not a command. Rather, it is a warning. They were crippled by the very fact that you existed at this point. It was too late for them to comprehend the severity of their error. The demon retreated even further while frantically trying to get away from your presence. Fear had transformed the predator into the prey, and your adversary stared helplessly, astonished by the power that your name alone commanded within the mind of the demon. Anxiety reigned. Recollections stoked the flames of a cruel and blinding rage. Your name reverberated across its brain, bringing back horrific memories of shadowy regions and legends that were terrifying, forbidden, and screamed from the depths of its conscience. You are the tormentor of their nightmares. You become their monster. It brought back memories of the abyss, which was dark and everlasting, where whispers proclaimed your deeds in hushed dread. Legends of wars won without struggle and unseen wins against powers that had existed since the beginning of time. The very fact that you existed caused ancient evils to be agitated and disrupted, plans that had been carefully crafted for millennia. As the demon recalled Dark Lord's shaking, fearful of coming into contact with you, it had made fun of such legends, self-assured in its ability to defeat them. Arrogance, however, was shattered when it was confronted with the reality. When it looked at you, it saw you plainly as a human figure, standing calmly in the midst of supernatural pandemonium. However, beneath that human veneer was a power that was so enormous that even darkness fled. The flames of the monster eventually extinguished completely, leaving it icy and exposed. It had never before had such a powerful sense of dread or felt so defenseless. Although the demon was solely familiar with violence, it appeared to be useless when it was directed against you. Fear seized the creature more tightly, rendering its will powerless as legends raced through its thoughts. It filled its head with legends of your protection, which included unwittingly sheltering entire populations and driving away beings that were significantly more powerful than itself. It was now aware that attacking you would result in complete and utter destruction. Your adversaries' voices became increasingly desperate and violent. They yelled commands that urged violence, but their words faded away ineffectively as the demon's growing panic overpowered them as it looked anxiously for a way out. Its hideous form shrunk even further and shadows began to dissipate. It was willing to suffer punishment rather than confront you. It used to seem ridiculous that legends of your power existed, but now they were incredibly and excruciatingly genuine. The solitary, overwhelming instinct to survive caused the demon to withdraw. Losing its mission in the process, it had been defeated by your name alone, which was uttered in a terrified whisper in the darkness. The demon was aware that your mythology was accurate. Your strength was indisputable. It was imperative that it run or perish. Their triumph was replaced by dread as voices rose in panic, shouting urgent commands. They wanted violence, demanded bloodshed, and urged on destruction. Yet their pleas went unheard. Your adversaries looked in bewilderment, their triumph melting into dread. The demon stood motionless as the silence gradually faded away. Fear emanated from its hideous shape, and it was apparent and spreading. It was unwilling and unable to accept instructions. As the summons came to the realization that the creature they had called, which was an embodiment of horror, was itself afraid, their confidence began to crumble. They looked at each other in a feverish manner, their eyes widening and their breaths occurring more quickly. Certainty gave place to desperate confusion. The louder they yelled, the louder they pleaded, and the louder they threatened. But nothing worked. Simply mentioning your name was enough to render the monster helpless and unable to move. It was trapped in its own nightmare. There was a terrifying realization that gradually dawned on them: their most powerful weapon have lost all of their value. The authority they wield is a horrible illusion. They had conjured up darkness with the intention of destroying you, convinced of their own domination and certain of their own destructiveness. But now they observed their arrogance unravel in a spectacular manner. There was a deep fear that caused the monster that they controlled to shrink in front of you. They felt that this creature would bring them ultimate revenge. They never anticipated this scenario. They never imagined that your silence and strength could easily undermine the careful planning that they had done because of the ancient symbols that were painstakingly engraved into the floor. They were completely overwhelmed with panic. They were broken and crumbling, and the power was clearly disintegrating around them. Despite their frantic chanting and violent shaking of their hands, they made a valiant effort to repair the harm. Yet their efforts were unsuccessful. They were words, meaningless rituals, and unnecessary. The demon's withdrawal caused the ties to break irreversibly, which resulted in the release of energies that they were no longer able to control. When they were confronted with the awful realization that they were vulnerable, their arrogance vanished, and it was replaced by a sense of helpless dread due to the fact that they had realized their error far too late. Their eyes darted anxiously looking for a way out. The roles were switched abruptly and violently because of their own acts. They were no longer hunters. Rather, they had become prey and were unable to escape. Their emotions were filled with a chilling and crushing terror. Watching as the realization shattered their self-assurance, you maintained your composure and remained unmoved despite the fact that you had not spoken and had not moved in an aggressive manner. Your presence completely dominated the room, as if distance might protect them from the force that you had inadvertently unleashed. The summers retracted even farther and moved away from you in an automatic manner. In spite of the fact that they had called upon darkness to put an end to your life, darkness feared you more than it frightened them. This cruel irony rendered them having been shattered and rendered helpless by the brutal reality. Their fate was solely dependent on your actions. You had stripped them down, leaving nothing but scared desperation in place of their old arrogance. Their defeat was absolute and cannot be denied. Your silent strength had stripped them bare. It was a moment of intense panic as the demon broke loose and old magic tore wildly through the circle that was beginning to crumble. Shadows exploded into pandemonium and dispersed in a highly disorganized manner while flames flickered and disappeared. Your adversaries screamed out in a helpless manner, their instructions fading away into the darkness without being heard. For the demon no longer cared about punishment, it dreaded only you. At the same time as its claws were tearing into reality, it ran quickly and desperately. Walls cracked as the air rushed violently inward, causing the chamber to shake violently. The candles were extinguished by a brisk breeze, which precipitated everyone into a state of frigid darkness. What was left behind by the demon was nothing but a void of emptiness where evil had previously existed, unable to move. Your adversaries stood motionless, their most powerful weapon no longer in their possession. They were overcome with fear and their wrath evaporated, leaving behind just shock and amazement. They stared blankly at the empty space. The demon, who is the personification of fear, had entirely abandoned them. The mere mention of your name was enough to cause it to retreat. Reverberations of its departure persisted like spectral mutterings, eventually dissipating into a spooky silence as their last remaining hope vanished into the void. Dread took its place as the dominant emotion when they were surrounded by their own arrogance. Your adversaries felt exposed, defenseless and trapped. A demon that they had summoned had been their greatest achievement. Now it had evaded the disgrace that they had feared the most in a state of helplessness. They watched as shadows vanished, leaving behind no power and no danger that could be used against you. Every sound heightened their worry, every creak enhanced their fear, and every breath magnified their fear. The summon has shivered their senses, sharpened by the intense anguish that they were experiencing. The call had been made. They were suddenly confronted with destruction head-on as the cruel reality slammed down around them. Their power was depleted and their defenses were smashed, leaving behind nothing but individuals who were filled with fear. Despite their best efforts, they were only able to ruin themselves. They had hoped to destroy you. The void that was left behind by the leaving demon was dominated by your nonverbal presence. They were caught by the very terror that they had unleashed, and the summoners had the impression that their fate was already decided. Their breathing increased as they waited, hopelessly aware that the true nightmare was about to come. And it was not the demon that was about to arrive, but you. Now, let us pause for a moment to pay tribute to those who have been selected. Among by itself, presence is dominant. It is silent, authoritative, and absolute. The eyes turn towards you, displaying fear and uncertainty. Despite this, you continue to be unimpressed and unaffected by the gloom that is all around you. Your adversaries will naturally retreat and move away from you. The confidence that they once possessed will be replaced by fear on their faces. They are more frightened by your composure than they were by the devil themselves. The air crackles with your power, which is heavy and cannot be denied, despite the fact that you do not make any threats or offer any violence. You remain completely silent and wait, compelling them to face the consequences of their actions. They flinched in response to your quiet, which says more than any words could ever do. Their disobedience was engulfed by your stare, which was filled with shame. After having attempted to eliminate you, they were now afraid of your judgment. The sound of each heartbeat reverberated loudly, and each breath became difficult and filled with terror. Your adversaries waited nervously and trembled, revealing their confidence, which vanished entirely, and was replaced by a terrible realization that they had crossed someone who was significantly more strong than they had assumed. Your composure crushed their self-assurance, and the very fact that you existed was enough to destroy their bravery. They had a profound comprehension of the stories which stated that your unassuming power is the real threat despite the fact that you did not move. Your strength was clearly seen throughout despite the fact that their heads were racing and they were anxiously trying to calculate escape. Shadows commanded complete and utter respect. The reality that they had been most concerned about was the coming of you when compared to your presence. There is no monster. They had employed evil in an attempt to defeat you, but it was unable to stand up to your power. At this moment you stood here triumphant without exerting any effort, whatever, for victory. The summon has experienced a sense of confinement and paralysis via uncertainty. Your unassuming strength terrified them beyond description. They became aware of their most significant error, which was to underestimate the force that was concealed within you. Your composure and your silence. This is what legends are afraid of. It is your power that has always been unseen, subtle, silent, and all-encompassing. This is the genuine meaning of power. Even if you were unable to comprehend it, you were aware of it. Shadows retreated wherever you went. Unseen dangers are eliminated before they may become apparent. It appeared as though your life was enchanted with danger, simply avoided, and damage always deflected. Friends made jokes about your good fortune as you quietly smiled, not realizing that it was something much more significant. Nightmares were not a common source of sleep disruption for you. Darkness never reached you. In the past, you have never observed these trends, and you have thought that abnormalities were just coincidences. In spite of this, your presence resonated like a warning signal beneath the curtain of reality. Your modest bravery reverberated throughout the worlds of the supernatural, and evil was aware of your name without making any deliberate effort. You protected a great number of innocent people from harm. On occasion, you were able to perceive it. Moments of tranquility that defied explanation. Unexpected warmth that replaced dread as you got glimpses of as you got closer. The shadows quickly retreated, and the whispering suddenly stopped being heard. You possessed a more acute intuition than most people. Impulses led you away from dangers that you could not see, even if you rationalized it away. You were ignorant that these instincts had the power to mold legends. The ripple effect of your influence was far more than you had anticipated. Even seemingly insignificant choices and acts of bravery had a profound impact on the world. When it came to the supernatural world, every decision was felt very strongly. Small acts of generosity were multiplied to a dramatic degree, which caused the darkness to be disturbed. Simple acts of compassion interrupted malevolent machinations. Deep dreams brought to light. You're hidden. The concept of guardianship refers to the protection of visions of locations that you have not yet really visited. Even though you awoke feeling bewildered, yet peaceful and easy dismissing it, these dreams were a reflection of reality. Even if your conscious mind denied it, your subconscious was aware of the power you possessed. Unbeknownst to them, those who are closest to you were protected by your presence and thrived in safety. The supernatural forces understood very well that if you caused harm to anyone related to you, the consequences would come quickly, quietly, and devastatingly. However, your family and friends were not exposed to any danger as a result of the events that you wrote off as being nothing more than chance. They were aware of this. They witnessed evidence of the protection that was invisible in the demon's terrified withdrawal. They had finally come to the realization that your guardianship did not require any acknowledgement. What your silent strength defended was not susceptible to being harmed by evil. Your very name served as a deterrent to the darkness, which resulted in the disappearance of threats. Your legend rose in the shadows. Your innate protection was so silent that no ritual or summoning could compare to it. You guarded without being aware of it. Power that was effortlessly emanating in spite of the fact that you were unaware of your own strength. Evil immediately recognized it, respecting boundaries that were never set and dreading repercussions that were never declared. All of this unseen guardianship was the defining characteristic of your existence. It was ordinary in your eyes, but exceptional to me because of your existence. Evil ran in fear because of the absolute influence that you had. It began in a manner that was barely overlooked. It was a typical evening that turned out to be spectacular. The darkness drew nearer than it ever had before. The shadows became more profound and chillier because of the surge of adrenaline and the fact that you moved without thinking. You were driven by something powerful that was concealed within you. You felt the shift immediately as your primordial instincts were triggered. It was an odd experience for you to come face to face with shadows that were alive and hungry for innocent souls. You had never been affected by fear. It was quick to take action. You took a decisive move forward, leaping ahead without any hesitation and meeting evil head-on. You did not have any training or weaponry. All you had was your presence and your will. Just by virtue of your bravery, the darkness retreated violently. Demonstrating its defeat, you were able to dismiss the occurrence with ease, claiming that it was a coincidence or a trick of light. However, in the realms of the supernatural, your acts reverberated loudly. Beings of darkness muttered in horror, their minds astonished by the effortless victory you achieved. Your name became synonymous with defeat, and it was repeated urgently as a warning to malevolent demons. Legends arose swiftly as a result of that single fight. Despite their covert fear of what you had done, they told the story which they shared their exaggeration of your might. Your objectives and your abilities elevated you to the status of a legend. That was significantly more impressive than the truth. Nevertheless, the fact remained straightforward. You operated on instinct with confidence that was unassailable and unending. Following that point, your reputation began to grow in a stealthy manner. You were actively avoided by darkness, which was scared of confrontation. Evil immediately recognized what you made sure to avoid doing. It was impossible to equal your silent might. You were the nightmare that haunted otherworldly nightmares and animals who no longer feared anything else. Terrified you because of It was the first clash that was responsible for shaping your fate. It created an invisible protection around you, which was born from your innate bravery and strength. When evil detected something that was unbreakable and unbeatable within you, it immediately withdrew, leaving you bewildered but uninjured during the process without being aware of the mythology that you had kindled. That regular night turned into something that was significantly more significant. The unspoken power that you possessed led to the incredible transformation of your life. Darkness became familiar with your name and murmured it in a scary manner for all eternity. since you unintentionally triumphed against evil within yourself. Decisions of a minor nature carried enormous the weight of a kind word or a courageous stride forward. Unremarkable actions had astonishing consequences. You grossly overestimated their potency and easily disregarded them. But in the secret realms, these motions reverberated loudly, brutally disturbing the malevolent intents of those who were making them. As a result of a compassionate choice, a tragedy that you were unaware was about to occur was averted. A casual encouragement encouraged courage, which in turn prevented darkness from quietly lurking close.